Imagine an empire that solved problems long before blueprints, built flowing water before bathrooms existed, and ruled people without phones, screens, or satellites. This was ancient Rome, a world run by order, planning, and clear thinking. It spread across half the known world, not through luck, but through systems that worked. Picture it not as marble and statues, but as a low, wet marsh beside a slow river. Simple huts, mud underfoot, shepherds calling to their flocks. Hardly the place you'd expect to become the most powerful city on earth. And yet, from this quiet beginning, Rome rose into something so advanced that even today its remains feel almost unreal. At its height, Rome touched 3 continents. Its ships crossed seas with ease. Its rulers managed millions of people without emails or databases. Fresh water flowed into cities. Waste was carried away underground. And by nightfall, crowds filled arenas to watch fire, steel, and blood. No civilization before it mixed daily comfort and raw spectacle like Rome did. This empire was not built by myths or miracles. It was built by strict rules, careful records, and a deep need to make things work better. Roman builders didn't dream of flying. They didn't chase wild ideas. They focused on drains, roads, and stone that lasted. Imagine looking at a wild swamp and saying, "We will build a great city here." No electricity, no engines, no shared plans, just math, manpower, and stubborn focus. And somehow they did it. Roman cities had warm floors, clean water, and hidden tunnels for waste, while much of the world still feared storms as signs from the gods. Rome's true strength was control. When nature stood in the way, they reshaped it. Mountains were cut through, rivers were moved, deserts were crossed, roads were laid stone by stone, straight and strong. All roads lead to Rome was not a saying. It was a fact you could walk. But Rome's greatest tool wasn't stone or metal. It was belief, total belief in itself. Every arch, every wall, every road said the same thing. We are meant to last. Even today, broken ruins seem to stand with pride. Picture an ancient arch, cracked but upright, as if asking, "Still here, are you?" Rome built without power grids, without machines, and without doubt. They didn't invent everything, but whatever they touched, they made stronger, larger, and harder to forget. If you want the real secret of Rome's long life, don't look to its armies or its laws. Look at its concrete. Empires fall, stone crumbles, but Roman concrete refuses to fade. They didn't invent concrete, but they changed it forever. By mixing lime with volcanic ash, they created a material that could survive time itself. They called it opus caementitium. It was so strong that it could heal its own cracks as years passed. Only recently did modern scientists realize how advanced this was. Quietly, they admitted that Rome may have solved a problem we still struggle with today. This concrete built temples, bridges, and harbors that still stand after 2,000 years. The Pantheon, with its massive dome, remains the largest of its kind ever built. No steel, no support. Many modern buildings fail in decades. Rome's stand for ages. To them, concrete was not just strong, it was art. They shaped it into arches and domes, so perfect that later builders spent centuries trying and often failing to copy them. They didn't conceal their engineering prowess. They celebrated it. The unspoken message was clear. We possess the strength to conquer, but we choose to captivate. You would find it everywhere, in towering aqueducts, grand amphitheaters, luxurious public baths, and even in harbors submerged beneath the sea. The ancient port of Caesarea Maritima, crafted from Roman marine concrete, still endures beneath the gentle sway of the waves. Modern divers, exploring its depths, might almost discern the faint, triumphant laughter of those ancient engineers. Of course, not everyone was captivated. Greek purists, known for their refined tastes, sometimes dismissed its rough texture, deeming it unsophisticated. But the Romans, engrossed in their ambitious reshaping of the world, paid them little mind. For them, concrete wasn't merely art. It was a foundational power, a means to build with undeniable authority. And this, perhaps, is the true elegance of Roman innovation. They didn't just construct monuments, they created permanence. The empire itself eventually dissolved. Its emperors faded into history, but their formidable walls quietly refused to follow suit. In the end, the deepest mystery isn't solely how Roman concrete worked so effectively. It's how the rest of us, in the vast expanse of time, allowed ourselves to forget its secrets. 2,000 years later, we still pour weaker cement, erect structures that often lack their enduring beauty, and label it progress. The Romans, in their quiet efficiency, might have simply called it a regrettable oversight. If you imagine Roman concrete as the very sinew and bone of the empire, then its aqueducts were undeniably its lifeblood, its intricate veins meticulously carrying not just sustenance, but also luxury, and yes, perhaps the occasional unexpected traveler, directly into the throbbing heart of its civilization. Before their time, you might have seen most urban centers relying on the nearest river or a simple well for their water, a method that, while perhaps quaint, was often a perilous pallet is prepulus cowis. With you be up separ, so of could of you so to do again with the can of I to of buck of you I to you to how you up I up to you do I give you if to you cup mo I got you if I but you swore and I my power I bye if the tip you if the bad you my bucket you could be thinking that you The Romans, with their pragmatic eye, simply looked at this and decided, no, thank you. Instead, they conceived and constructed an astounding network of gravity-powered waterways, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, delivering fresh, clean water to over 1 million people. There were no noisy pumps, no worry motors, just an elegant combination of sophisticated mathematics, a touch of unwavering confidence, and an unerring sense of perfect angles. Each aqueduct was a quiet masterpiece of precision. Their engineers calculated gradients so exquisitely subtle that water could journey for immense distances without spilling a single precious drop. They patiently carved tunnels through solid mountains, gracefully spanned vast valleys with soaring stone arches, and ensured the water arrived with just enough pressure to create a public fountain display that, while perhaps dramatically unnecessary, was undeniably satisfying to behold. And yes, you might note their use of lead pipes, which, in a playful historical speculation, could offer a gentle explanation for some of the more eccentric pronouncements of later emperors, such as marrying horses or declaring themselves divine. But, setting aside the potential toxicity, the system functioned with remarkable, quiet perfection. Water flowed generously into homes, luxurious public baths, verdant gardens, and magnificent fountains built seemingly for the sole purpose of proclaiming, "We live in abundance and cleanliness beyond compare." Rome itself was graced with over 11 of these vital arteries, each bearing a name bestowed with the same sense of dignified importance you might find for a luxury brand today. Aqua Marcia, Aqua Claudia, Aqua Virgo, the very essence of antiquity's vital flow. Imagine, for a moment, the year 312 BCE as you stand at the dawn of an incredible achievement. You would have witnessed the completion of Rome's very first aqueduct, the Aqua Appia, a marvel whose gentle flow still murmurs through the city even today. It's a testament to a vision so profound, a stark contrast to the fleeting nature of modern systems that sometimes falter after just a few years. At its zenith, this intricate network delivered an astonishing 200 million gallons of water each day, a volume so immense it could effortlessly fill hundreds of Olympic-sized pools, though Rome, with its gladiatorial spectacles, had other priorities for its grand displays. Picture the scene: public baths, perpetually open, their warm waters inviting you to linger. Fountains, designed for sheer aesthetic pleasure, would gush with a soothing, constant sound, their sparkling streams catching the sunlight. Even the humblest citizen could indulge in a refreshing rinse, free from the indignity of a muddy puddle. For the Romans, clean running water wasn't a luxury. It was the very essence of their civilization. They believed it was what truly set humanity apart. An irony, perhaps, given that much of Europe would seemingly forget this fundamental truth for the next 1,000 years. Rome didn't merely master water, it mastered the art of comfort. And it is this quiet genius, more than any roaring conquest, that allows their empire's legacy to echo so softly through time. For while the names of generals may fade, the memory of those who built the conduits that brought life-giving water remains ingrained. If there was one sensation the Romans found utterly unbearable, it was the pervasive presence of filth, or, more precisely, the filth of others. Their cities, though often a lively tapestry of bustling crowds and the aroma of questionable street food, somehow maintained a remarkable cleanliness. Rome achieved what so many medieval cities later struggled with. It found a way to manage human waste, preventing it from overwhelming their daily lives. At the heart of this quiet ingenuity lay the Cloaca Maxima, one of the world's earliest sewer systems, begun around the 6th century BCE. It started as a simple drainage channel, steadily evolving into a vast subterranean labyrinth that even now carries water away beneath your feet, a truly impressive feat if you gently disregard the nature of the water it transports. The Cloaca Maxima would discreetly collect runoff from the streets, the bathhouses, and even the latrines, funneling everything into the Tiber River, where, in true Roman fashion, someone might still have been casting a fishing line. It wasn't entirely perfect, but it quietly ensured the city never drowned in the very conveniences it created. The medieval world, for 1,000 years, would not rediscover this concept, often choosing instead to simply toss waste from windows and hope for a strong breeze to carry it away. The Romans possessed an almost sacred devotion to public hygiene. You would find public baths in every city, enormous complexes where the gentle steam would rise from heated pools, leading to quiet steam rooms and spaces for exercise. Everyone, from a distinguished senator to a weary slave, could bathe daily, exchanging hushed gossip and debating politics, while comfortably enveloped in the warmth of shared ambition. Even their toilets were communal, long marble benches with simple openings, no dividing walls, and a shared sponge on a stick. It wasn't glamorous, but it was remarkably efficient. The Romans, blissfully unaware of germs, still managed to live with a level of cleanliness that most 14th century kings could only dream of. And here's where their genius truly shines. They transformed sanitation into a form of quiet propaganda. Aqueducts, sewers, and baths weren't just practical civic utilities. They were tangible proof of their moral superiority. Cleanliness to them was civilization itself, while dirt was the mark of barbarism. When Romans looked upon conquered territories, they didn't just see enemies, they saw people who still relied on buckets. In essence, Rome was the first society to truly grasp that infrastructure shapes identity. Their empire flowed on to currents, the steady pressure of water and the quiet surge of pride. And while emperors might have been prone to madness, at least their cities bore a more pleasant aroma than history often suggests. If Roman concrete formed the sturdy skeleton of their empire, and the aqueducts served as its vital veins, then their roads were undoubtedly the pulsing arteries, pumping life through an immense body. The empire, you see, had a vast amount of life to circulate, constructing over 250,000 miles of roads that stretched from the sun-drenched sands of Egypt to the misty fogs of Britain. That's enough to encircle the earth 10 times over, a feat the Romans, in their boundless determination, might well have attempted just to make a point. These weren't mere dirt tracks either. Roman roads were built with military precision, layered with robust gravel, solid stone, and, legend says, perhaps the crushed complaints of anyone who questioned the sheer effort involved. Their engineers planned every gentle slope and subtle curve with mathematical exactitude, for a Roman detested nothing more than inefficiency, save perhaps the sight of a Gaul. They didn't just build roads for travel, they built them for control. These pathways moved armies with quiet urgency, carried taxes across vast distances, and spread gossip at astonishing speeds. A message could traverse the distance from Gaul to Rome in mere days, assuming, of course, the messenger wasn't waylaid, which, statistically, was a common occupational hazard, yet still centuries faster than any rival civilization. Every milestone along these roads stood as a quiet declaration of Roman dominance, meticulously carved, with precise distances and an emperor's approved sense of enduring power. The famous Via Appia, often called the Queen of Roads, was so perfectly paved that even to millennia later you can still walk upon its ancient stones, though today it mostly hosts a gentle parade of bewildered tourists and curious stray cats. Each road was designed for eternity. You would find layers, large, firm stones forming the deep foundation, smaller gravel filling the middle, and smooth, interlocking paving blocks creating the surface, gently tilted to allow for proper drainage. The result? Roads that serenely outlasted empires, earthquakes, and the relentless European weather, the ultimate test of endurance. Modern highways, by comparison, seem to demand repair with almost every changing season. Meanwhile, the Via Flaminia quietly persists, observing us from its ancient vantage point, as if whispering, "You call that asphalt." But Rome's roads weren't solely practical. They were a form of psychological influence. Every straight, unwavering line seemed to convey a silent message. You are now part of Rome. Should you consider rebellion, we will be there by Tuesday. And, in truth, that quiet assurance is what made the Roman Empire so formidable. Not just the legions, nor the emperors, but the seamless, relentless rhythm of their logistics. For while others contended with the mud of their daily lives, Rome was gently contending with time, and, for a very long while, winning. If the roads were Rome's arteries, then its sophisticated courier system was the empire's quiet connection. Its ancient Wi-Fi, remarkably fast, largely dependable, though occasionally intercepted by distant tribes. Rome understood that an empire wasn't merely forged by the sword. It was maintained by the swift whisper of communication. Orders had to travel faster than the seeds of rebellion could take root. And so they created the cursus publicus, a state-run postal service initiated by Augustus, who, it seems, had a keen desire to receive urgent news with great speed. This was no casual mail delivery. It was a marvel of logistical design, complete with meticulously planned stations, a vast network of horses, and diligent bureaucrats who likely found solace in their meticulous ledgers. Couriers would carry delicate wax tablets, important scrolls, and weighty imperial decrees across thousands of miles, changing fresh horses at designated way stations known as asterisk mutations. The privileged could send messages across the expansive empire in a matter of mere days, a remarkable feat, unless, of course, those messages happened to be tax bills. Each courier wore an official badge, the ancient world's quiet equivalent of a government email signature, riding steadfastly day and night, their journey a constant rhythmic pulse across the vast Roman landscape. Imagine, for a moment, the whisper of ancient hoofbeats carrying vital news across vast distances, a relentless rhythm under a boundless sky. You're envisioning the Roman messaging system, a marvel of its age. At every designated stop, a fresh horse awaited, ready to spring forward, ensuring the message kept its urgent pace. The messengers, always pushing onward, faced perils less about the route itself and more about the sheer strain of their journey, the deep fatigue that settled in their bones, the looming threat of bandits, or the quiet dread of accidentally delivering a decree of death to an unintended recipient. The efficiency of this network was truly astonishing, almost unsettling in its precision. A direct command from the emperor in the heart of Rome could reach the distant lands of Egypt in less than a week. Rebellious factions, perhaps just beginning to murmur thoughts of defiance, would find themselves gently, yet firmly, reminded of their continued allegiance long before their plans could fully unfold. And because Rome's spirit was so deeply intertwined with control, they meticulously crafted maps, intricate parchment scrolls that unfurled to reveal every winding route, every welcoming town, every necessary way station. The most famous of these, the Tabula Peutingera, drifts before your mind's eye like a cosmic map of tangled threads, an ancient guide for travelers in simple sandals, much like a whispered navigation system for its time. Yet, this extraordinary service was not for the everyday citizen. You wouldn't have used it to send a tender letter to a loved one, or to mail a pair of sandals to your grandmother across the empire. The cursus publicus, as it was known, was strictly for the empire's business military directives, meticulous tax records, and the emperor's constant, watchful eye over every detail. If you were a civilian with a message to send, your best hope was to entrust it to a friend, whispering a silent prayer that they would arrive safely. Even so, for its era, it was a profound achievement. Rome had woven the world's very first high-speed information web, sustained by the tireless spirit of horses and human endurance. Messages flowed across continents, binding the empire together, allowing its immense bureaucracy to hum with quiet, efficient purpose. It wasn't about glamour, but its absolute functionality, its unwavering ability to simply asterisk work. Asterisk was, in Rome, the highest form of beauty. Now, let your thoughts drift from the whispers of communication to the silent grandeur of Roman architecture. These weren't merely structures. They were grand pronouncements, propaganda solidified in stone. Every majestic dome, every stately column, every perfect arch seemed to declare, with quiet, mathematical certainty, we are superior, and here is the proof. The Romans never thought small. They thought monumentally, crafting public works so imposing they could almost make a conquered nation forget their defeat, at least until the inevitable tax collector arrived. Their buildings offered more than just shelter. They were powerful statements. Consider the Colosseum, for instance. It could welcome over 50,000 souls, offering retractable awnings to shade them from the sun, and elevators powered by the unseen strength of many to bring spectacles to life. Its crowd control was so sophisticated it might humble many modern venues, all so you could witness, with a hush of anticipation, wild beasts engaging in their brutal dance. And then there was the Pantheon, a structure so exquisitely conceived it appears as if the gods themselves might have sculpted it on a particularly inspired day. Its concrete dome, a masterpiece of ancient engineering, still holds the record as the largest unreinforced dome in the world, as if to subtly suggest that using rebar was simply for those less bold. The perfect circular opening at its apex, the oculus, was not merely an architectural flourish. It was a silent, powerful assertion. Light would stream through it, a visible benediction, softly illuminating the very core of Rome's greatest accomplishment, its own colossal self-regard. Roman architects didn't merely master symmetry. They harnessed it as a powerful tool. They sculpted arches and vaults, not just for their inherent strength, but for their profound aesthetic beauty. These elegant curves made the sprawling aqueducts possible, made bridges seem to stretch into eternity, and endowed temples with a quiet resilience against the relentless march of time. Their genius lay not in decorating structures with art, but in making the structure itself the art, a silent testament to their vision. And then there was the sheer scale. The Romans adored making you feel small. Stepping into the vastness of a basilica or the echoing chambers of a bathhouse wasn't necessarily a relaxing experience. It was a humbling one. These monumental buildings seemed to dwarf everyone beneath them, gently reminding citizens that while Rome was infinite, they, in the grand scheme, were fleeting. Even the intricate floor mosaics, with their quiet designs, sometimes seemed to gaze back at you with a soft, knowing judgment. Every element of Roman architecture struck a delicate balance between practical utility and breathtaking showmanship. The engineering was flawlessly conceived, but so was the silent, unspoken marketing. Each soaring structure seemed to whisper, "We built this for you," but also to subtly remind you of your own smallness. And perhaps that was their ultimate brilliance. The Romans constructed not just to endure, but to utterly outlast, to leave an indelible mark for the future, a quiet assurance that while empires may crumble, truly magnificent architecture has a way of defiantly standing firm. Today, countless travelers queue in hushed reverence to admire these persistent ruins, and in the soft dust of ages you can almost hear the faint echo of an ancient architect, a silent whisper that says, "You're welcome." You see, Rome's most profound innovation wasn't the glint of a sword or even the strength of concrete. It was geometry infused with a determined attitude. The arch, that graceful curve, transformed the seemingly impossible into enduring architecture. Before the Romans, builders constructed flat forms, flat walls, flat ceilings, flat roofs that, it sometimes seemed, might tremble and collapse with the slightest tremor from the heavens. Then came the Romans, who looked at the immutable force of gravity and, with quiet confidence, said no. The Roman arch, through its ingenious redistribution of weight, allowed them to erect aqueducts that marched across landscapes, bridges that defied raging rivers, and stadiums that stood unwavering, even as the empires that built them eventually faded. Every elegant curve, every precisely placed keystone, every single brick seemed to whisper a kind of serene, mathematical poetry. The arch didn't just support the physical structure. In a deeper sense, it held the very empire together. And then, when a single arch wasn't enough, the Romans simply replicated it, stretching these curves across ceilings to form vaults arches in series. They gave them elegant names, like the barrel vault, the groin vault, the cross vault, each a testament to ancient structural ingenuity. They employed them in bathhouses, in grand temples, and in bustling basilicas, not always out of sheer necessity, but often simply because they possessed the profound skill to do so. The Colosseum alone, a silent giant, contains a staggering 240 arches, stacked in graceful tiers, like a meticulously crafted engineering marvel. Each arch perfectly balanced the unseen forces of tension and compression, guiding the immense weight gently down to its solid foundations. Modern architects, even today, study these ancient designs with a quiet awe. Sometimes, it is said, shedding a silent tear of admiration. But Rome didn't merely stop at the physics of construction. They imbued their arches with a breathtaking beauty. You couldn't walk more than a few steps in a Roman city without encountering one, often named after some figure whose true merits might now be lost to time. Triumphal arches were the empire's grand public announcements, stately declarations of, "We have achieved victory." Behold this colossal reminder. The Arch of Titus, for instance, immortalizes the conquest of Jerusalem in glorious carved stonework. Indeed, nothing quite proclaims, "Please admire our empire," like freezing someone else's profound tragedy in cold, majestic marble. And that, truly, is the essence of it. The Romans didn't just master gravity. They, in a subtle yet powerful way, seemed to humble it. Their architecture wasn't simply about enduring nature's whims. It was about outsmarting it, publicly, and with an undeniable flair. To millennia later, their arches still stand serenely, unbuilt, while many glass skyscrapers, for all their modern prowess, might show cracks under the gentlest of seismic shifts. The Roman Empire may have succumbed to political struggles, devastating plagues, and leadership woes, but their geometry, their profound understanding of form and force, remains, quietly, utterly undefeated. Now, let your mind's eye turn to water, not just water to drink, but water as a living, working force. The Romans didn't merely build asterisk with asterisk water. They mastered its very essence. Where other civilizations might have viewed rivers as charming but potentially hazardous natural features, Rome saw an inexhaustible source of power, a tireless worker that never required a lunch break. They transformed the steady flow of water into diligent labor, and true to their character, they harnessed this power on an industrial scale. The empire's brilliant engineers developed sophisticated water mills, robust hydraulic saws, and vast grain factories capable of feeding entire bustling cities. Consider places like the Barbegal Mill complex in southern France, where 16 massive water wheels, turning in perfect, synchronized harmony, created what was, in effect, the ancient world's most advanced food processing plant, albeit without any of our modern health codes. It is often celebrated as the world's first imagined standing amidst the remains of a vast ancient factory. The air is still, but you can almost hear the soft rush of water that once powered everything. It's a sight that's both breathtaking and a little unsettling, perhaps reminding you of the relentless march of time or the quiet hum of a distant machine. Their cleverness, you see, extended far beyond merely grinding grain. Picture powerful streams directed to turn enormous stone saws, cutting through solid marble with quiet determination. Or envision ingenious mechanisms lifting water for thirsty fields and sturdy pumps steadily draining deep mines. When you hear the term Roman engineer, perhaps it sounds a bit dry. But consider this. These were people who literally redirected entire rivers, all to make bread for their cities more quickly. And the secret to all this power, pure, unadorned gravity. It was the silent, invisible force, a tireless worker that kept their vast empire turning. No electric hum, no smoky fossil fuels, no modern talk of sustainability. Just raw, unyielding practicality. Water would enter one path, and power would effortlessly emerge from another. Simple, yes, yet profoundly beautiful, and in its sheer scope, a little terrifying. Their mastery of water even stretched into grand spectacles. Beneath the very floor of the Colosseum, imagine a hidden network capable of slowly filling the arena for dramatic mock naval battles. It was, in essence, the ancient world's most spectacular special effect. Watching entire ships seemingly float and fight within a vast stadium, thousands upon thousands of gallons of water, entering and draining on command, all for the breathtaking show. What truly captivates the mind is how much of this intricate system still whispers to us today. The ruins at Barbagal, for instance, still outline the faint courses of forgotten channels and sluice gates, like the silent echoes of engineers who never truly left their posts. To millennia later, we still find ourselves pondering whether the Romans were unadulterated geniuses, or perhaps a touch unhinged. Yet, one truth remains undeniably clear. They constructed an empire not just through military might, but through constant movement. Water gently flowed, gears steadily turned, cities were nourished, and history quietly acknowledged their incredible feat. Rome didn't merely dominate nature, it harnessed it, putting it to work, without ever needing to grant it a single day of rest. After all that conquest, the Romans desired more than just dominion. They yearned for true comfort within their vast empire. What good, they might have wondered, was ruling the world if your beautiful marble villa felt perpetually chilly? This desire led to the ingenious invention of the hypocaust, their own version of central heating, conceived to millennia before anyone else ever considered complaining about a draft. The system was brilliantly straightforward. A robust furnace would glow beneath the floor, sending currents of warm air through hollow bricks that lined the underfloor spaces and up through flues hidden within the walls. The result, floors that radiated gentle warmth beneath your bare feet, baths that stayed invitingly hot, and a quiet, profound sense of satisfaction. Imagine yourself, a wealthy Roman, strolling comfortably barefoot in the chill of January, while far to the north, hardy barbarians, still huddled by smoky fires, just trying to thaw out. These same principles were scaled up dramatically for their public bathhouses. The baths of Caracalla, for example, could embrace thousands of people at once, each enjoying perfectly calibrated warmth within enormous, echoing halls. Far below, out of sight, hundreds of tireless laborers would steadily shovel wood into roaring furnaces, a distinctive Roman brand of efficiency, offering sublime luxury for a select few, balanced by relentless exertion for the many. Even their plumbing was remarkably sophisticated. Streams of hot, cold, and gently tepid water flowed through intricate pipes and gracefully sculpted fountains, making Roman spas the envy of the known world, though, it must be said, sometimes posing a subtle threat when the lead in the pipes became a little too prevalent. Still, the sheer comfort was undeniable, and they didn't stop at heating. Wealthy Romans even ventured into early forms of climate control, storing snow gathered from distant mountains in specially insulated pits, then using it to gently cool their fine wines or to subtly refresh the air in their dining rooms. In essence, it was the very first whisper of air conditioning, powered entirely by dedicated individuals with weary backs and admirable endurance. This Roman pursuit of comfort bordered on something sacred. Every grand villa, every public bath, every imperial palace was, in its own way, a shrine to convenience. Heat, water, even ambient light, all were meticulously harnessed for pleasure, creating a sense of lavish, almost beautiful extravagance. The empire, though often brutal, was never allowed to feel truly cold. So, as you drift into the thought of medieval Europe, later struggling through harsh winters with only simple fireplaces and earnest prayers, remember that Rome had already perfected the art of living as if the entire world was their personal domain, because, for a time, it truly was. In the quiet conclusion, the Romans didn't just master warmth, they extended their control over the very air itself, over flowing water, over the essence of comfort, and in doing so, over the very expectations of everyone around them. Roman builders, you see, didn't possess the sleek machines, roaring engines, or powerful forklifts we know today. Their arsenal consisted of stout ropes, clever pulleys, and men with an almost unbelievable physical strength. Yet, despite this seeming simplicity, they managed to hoist multi-ton stones high into the heavens, placing them with a precision that would likely astound any modern construction team. Their remarkable secret weapon was the treadwheel crane, a colossal wooden wheel, spacious enough for 2 or more men to walk inside, like human hamsters embarking on a most perilous journey. As they steadily tramped forward, their weight rotated the giant wheel. The rope slowly wound around its axle, and the immense stone block would gradually ascend. It was a beautiful application of pure physics, powered entirely by sweat, unwavering determination, and perhaps a touch of daring. These ingenious cranes could effortlessly lift several tons, but the Romans weren't content to stop there. They ingeniously compounded pulleys, integrated gears, and multiplied the available force until they could raise towering columns, reaching heights that often surpassed many of our modern buildings. Think of the mighty Colosseum, the Grand Forum, the majestic Pantheon. None of these architectural wonders would have ever graced the landscape without the relentless creak of these wooden machines and the quiet, exhausted sighs of the people within them. And, of course, they achieved all of this without a single safety regulation. No protective helmets, no safety harnesses, no cheerful posters marking days without accident. If something went wrong, gravity ensured the outcome was swift and irreversible. Yet, astonishingly, the work was completed, often flawlessly. Roman engineers approached mechanical advantage as if it were a divine revelation. They didn't just build individual cranes, they orchestrated entire systems. Their construction sites were intricate symphonies of levers, capstans, hoists, all accompanied by a chorus of coordinated shouts. They even masterfully employed counterweights, an idea so profoundly intelligent that it wouldn't become a standard practice again until the Renaissance, when someone, centuries later, finally realized, wait, Didn't the Romans already perfect this? The sheer scale of their organization was truly breathtaking. Cranes would be meticulously assembled, then in turn lift the massive columns, giving the impression that these grand buildings almost constructed themselves. That is, if themselves implies hundreds of dedicated, unpaid laborers being directed by an architect in simple sandals. This powerful technology spread throughout their vast empire. Every bustling port, every robust bridge, every elegant basilica owed its very existence to these silent, tireless machines. They might not possess the glamour of the aqueducts or the beauty of marble statues, but they were the unsung heroes that made all those wonders possible. In a profound way, Rome didn't just conquer the world. It meticulously lifted it, one monumental stone at a time. And when you stand before the magnificent Colosseum today, gazing up at its seemingly impossible height, allow yourself a quiet moment to remember this. It was meticulously built by human hands, without the familiar beeping of modern cranes, the gentle hum of hydraulics, or the collective voice of a union. Just rope, precise mathematics, and a profound, exhilarating touch of madness. While Rome certainly embodied the immense strength and relentless will of the ancient world, its counterpart, the vibrant city of Alexandria, often served as its brilliant mind, and, at times, a curious laboratory for the most unexpected, perhaps even peculiar, inventions that no one had ever quite envisioned. Under the steady gaze of Roman governance, this city, a bustling hub for profound scholars, ingenious inventors, and even a few delightfully brigand to brigand so wonderfully imatifully and wonderfully if so wonderfully is so wita wonderfully save on bristly in a boy I have you to gabe of the two what I like to the I do I deny but do was to you in yeah but the God what you make I man I you I woo as I woo at times if I if you if I do but if imagine, if you will, a time so far removed, its innovations might still seem like tales from a distant future. A gentle whisper through the annals of history introduces us to a true marvel of the mechanical world. Hero of Alexandria. He was more than a scholar. He was a silent orchestrator of wonders. A mind so far advanced, his creations felt like pure enchantment rather than mere engineering. You might picture him, perhaps, in a sun-drenched workshop, not merely content with the simple mechanics of levers or pulleys, but dreaming of something more profound, something that would elicit a quiet gasp of awe. His genius manifested in a series of captivating devices. Think of temple doors that would slowly, mysteriously part on their own, as if by divine will, or delicate wine cups that would softly refill themselves. Imagine the gentle chirping of automaton birds, their mechanical melodies echoing in the quiet air, or even a precursor to our modern vending machines, a quiet mechanism where, with the gentle drop of a coin, a stream of sacred water would quietly flow forth. Yes, 2 millennia ago, you could, with a simple offering, receive a measure of divine refreshment. It's a quiet testament, isn't it, to how certain human impulses, like commerce and belief, have always found a way to intertwine. Yet, among all his silent marvels, one invention truly captivated the imagination: the eolipile. Picture it, a hollow metal sphere, delicately balanced, that would gently begin to spin as steam, released through its tiny nozzles, softly propelled it It was a dance of pure, mesmerizing motion, a spectacle designed to evoke nothing but quiet wonder. It powered absolutely nothing, served no practical purpose, yet it was cherished precisely for its elegant uselessness. It existed purely to inspire a soft of admiration before people quietly went about their day. Much like a modern showcase of abstract art, the Romans, who observed these inventions, were certainly impressed by the artistry, but not quite moved to practical application. They might have quietly admired Hero's spinning globe, perhaps whispering, "Charming, but can it help us build a majestic aqueduct?" Of course, it couldn't. And so, this pioneering steam engine was gently set aside, destined to wait for nearly 1,700 years, humanity's longest quiet pause before a grand awakening. Still, Alexandria itself, with its shimmering intellect, was a focal point of ancient ingenuity. It felt like a city born from a beautiful, intellectual dream. From its vibrant streets emerged not just Hero's creations, but an array of intricate automata, the hushed melodies of water organs, and the steady, rhythmic measure of hydraulic clocks. Imagine temples where the doors might slowly open, responding to a quiet flame, or statues that would subtly shift, animated by unseen currents of air. Fountains would sing with the soft murmur of water. The delicate boundary between scientific understanding and perceived magic became so wonderfully blurred that one might find people quietly offering prayers to the very engineers who conceived these marvels. Hero and his fellow innovators weren't driven by the need to solve pressing problems. They were driven by a quiet, internal spark of possibility, simply because they could create. It wasn't about the practical, it was a profound form of performance art. And this, truly, is what made Alexandria so utterly remarkable. While Rome, with its enduring strength, built structures for eternity, Alexandria quietly built for sheer wonder. One gifted us the steadfastness of concrete and the quiet efficiency of sewers. The other, the soft clink of the first coin-operated machine and a timeless prototype of pure, unadulterated look, what I made joy. For a brief, shimmering moment, these two empires, so different in their approaches, met in a shared sphere of genius. Now, let us turn our gaze to the Romans themselves. They didn't begin their long journey as intrepid seafarers. No, they were, you could say, firmly rooted land dwellers, quite content with their sturdy sandals and the solid ground beneath their feet. But as they quietly expanded their reach, they soon realized that a substantial portion of the Mediterranean Sea presented a rather inconvenient, watery obstacle. So, in true Roman fashion, they did what they always did with such determined precision. They observed, they quietly borrowed, and then they refined it until their adaptations inspired a quiet sense of awe and perhaps a touch of apprehension in everyone around them. By the twilight years of the Republic, Rome had quietly assembled one of the most formidable navies the world had ever known. Their vessels weren't celebrated for their graceful lines like the swift Greek triremes. No, these were floating bastions of raw determination, crafted from timber and bronze, radiating an unspoken aggression like silent battering rams gliding across the waves. And, quite naturally, they industrialized their shipbuilding process with a quiet, relentless efficiency. The Carthaginians, once, had quietly chuckled at the Roman sailors, deeming them mere amateurs. The Roman response was swift and methodical. They quietly captured a Carthaginian vessel, meticulously deconstructed it to understand its secrets, and then, in a silent whirlwind of activity, built a fleet of 120 ships within a mere 2 months. Nothing, truly, speaks of a steep learning curve, quite like the quiet, calculated art of weaponized mimicry. The true stroke of quiet genius, however, was the Corvus boarding bridge, formidable and silent, with a massive iron spike at its end. When it slammed into an enemy ship, its heavy weight and spiked grip silently locking the two vessels together, Roman soldiers could then storm across, transforming a chaotic naval engagement into the familiar, methodical ground combat, where they truly excelled at their quiet, determined work of confrontation. It was a brilliant move, if perhaps a touch perilous. Many of their ships, burdened by the extra weight, quietly capsized. But then again, strategy has rarely been about absolute safety, has it? Their shipyards, with their rhythmic hammers and quiet industry, transformed warfare into a vast, efficient assembly line. Dozens of galleys would quietly slide into the water each week, each one propelled by hundreds of rowers whose deepest dreams, one might imagine, simply involved being somewhere, anywhere else. Some vessels even carried rotating ballistinormous crossbows, silently swiveling, capable of launching flaming bolts across the dark waves. Can you imagine being a sailor and the quiet realization dawning that your job now might include the risk of becoming a flammable target? And then, as a testament to their enduring ingenuity, came the harbors themselves. Magnificent concrete structures designed to cure quietly beneath the water's surface. Roman engineers, with their profound understanding of materials, blended volcanic ash with seawater to forge a marine concrete that seemed to defy the very elements, quietly resisting erosion. Two millennia later, many of those very ports still stand, silent sentinels, almost mocking the fleeting nature of our modern coastal cities that often begin to crumble after just a decade of the quiet, relentless work of weather. The Navy itself, then, quietly transformed into the very circulatory system of the empire. It moved legions with silent purpose, carried goods with steady rhythm, and even transported whispers of gossip, all with greater speed than any dusty caravan. When Rome quietly declared the Mediterranean to be *mare nostrum our sea, it wasn't merely a boast of arrogance. It was a calm, confident declaration of their mastery, a simple accounting of their quiet, formidable control. The Romans might not have expressed a poetic love for the ocean, but they undeniably mastered its currents and its vastness. Their fleets didn't embark on voyages of exploration. Instead, they moved with silent authority, enforcing the empire's will. Every gentle wave carried the quiet echo of the empire. Every port proudly displayed its flag. They didn't merely conquer land. They quietly, methodically conquered the intricate dance of logistics. And in the ancient world, that quiet, steady mastery was often far more unsettling than any lurking shark. For all their spirited games and, perhaps, their questionable tastes in wine, the Romans embraced the practice of medicine with a surprising degree of quiet seriousness. They might not have grasped the invisible world of germs, no, but they possessed a deep, intuitive understanding that sharp, precise tools, combined with unwavering confidence, could often bring about remarkable solutions. Roman doctors, or Medici, were a quiet blend of skilled healer, resourceful improviser, and, perhaps, a cautious gambler. Most learned their craft from the esteemed Greek physicians, whom Rome quietly absorbed, much like it did with olives, profound philosophy, and other cultural treasures it later, perhaps, quietly claimed as its own. The outcome was a medical system that was, you might say, half-brilliant insight, half-practical experimentation, and entirely audacious. They possessed an array of instruments that would still feel familiar in a modern setting. Scalpels that gleamed softly, bone saws with their quiet promise of precision, forceps designed for delicate grasp, and even catheters, all meticulously fashioned from bronze or iron, and designed, one might gently surmise, to make you quietly contemplate your life choices. Archaeologists in places like Pompeii have unearthed surgical kits that, in their meticulous design, wouldn't look out of place in a contemporary hospital. The only significant difference, of course, being the notable absence of anesthesia or any concept of malpractice insurance. Surgery, rather remarkably, was often performed publicly, which, at least, offered a quiet saving on theater tickets. And yet, despite these stark conditions, some treatments yielded astonishingly good results. Roman physicians quietly administered opium for its gentle, pain-relieving qualities, used vinegar for its sterilizing properties, and applied honey as a soothing antiseptic. They performed intricate amputations, skillfully set broken bones, and even undertook cataract surgery, employing long, slender bronze needles, up quiet testament to the blurred line where profound bravery and sheer audacity sometimes become indistinguishable. Public health, too, was a quiet, pervasive Roman obsession. They built dedicated hospitals, meticulously enforced sanitation standards, and genuinely cared about the purity of their water supply concepts that, sadly, much of Europe would quietly forget after the empire's eventual decline. Soldiers received care in valetudinaria, which were, in essence, the world's first organized military hospitals. Imagine a legionary, perhaps with a javelin wound, quietly walking into such a facility and, by some measure of remarkable progress, walking out only mildly infected. That, truly, was a quiet triumph. Everyday life was infused with this same quiet efficiency regarding personal well-being. Romans used soap concocted from animal fat and ashes for their daily ablutions. They quietly brushed their teeth with finely crushed shells and applied cosmetic creams that could serve a dual purpose, acting as a protective sunscreen, or, depending on the carefully guarded recipe, a more nefarious concoction. Their pursuit of cleanliness bordered on the sacred. Bathing was not merely a luxury, but a profound ritual, hygiene elevated to a quiet form of devotion. Of course, not every aspect was perfectly illuminated by scientific understanding. If your ailment presented a puzzling challenge to a physician, he might gently recommend a quiet prayer to Aesculapius, the god of healing, or, perhaps, suggest the application of pigeon dung to the wound. In that fascinating era, the quiet interplay between scientific inquiry and ancient superstition remained a captivating, often contradictory, dance. Imagine a world where your bed was shared not by choice, but out of necessity, in rooms where the air hung heavy and close. Yet, for a civilization that faded 1,500 years before anyone even conceived of invisible germs, Roman society was remarkably resilient. Their healers, though often ungentle in their methods, sometimes stumbled upon heroic cures, almost never hindered by any concept of cleanliness. But even the grandest empires eventually lose their driving force, their financial footing, or simply their collective mind. Rome, in its final chapters, seemed to lose all three at once. Picture the 5th century, a time when the most brilliant engineers on earth found themselves not building new marvels, but frantically patching crumbling aqueducts, only for raiding parties to shatter them anew. The empire that once perfected the art of clean water now found itself wading through metaphorical, and often quite literal, muck. This descent wasn't a sudden plunge, but a slow, creeping decay. You could almost feel the shift as maintenance faltered. The magnificent roads began to crack and heave, and the famed marble baths grew cool and silent. The channels that once sang with flowing water now offered a quiet passage for rodents. People started seeing the majestic Colosseum not as a monument, but as a convenient quarry, its grand arches pulled apart to frame a humble farmhouse doorway. The Pantheon, a testament to baffling genius, remained standing, mostly because its builders' secrets were so profound that no one could figure out how to dismantle it. Concrete, that forgotten miracle of ancient chemistry, vanished from human knowledge for nearly 1,000 years. Medieval attempts to recreate it resulted in structures that crumbled faster than the kingdoms they were meant to support. The very idea of plumbing dissolved. Cities shrank back into shadows, and Europe settled into a more primal state, muddy, cold, and quick to blame the unseen forces of witchcraft for a sudden storm. Yet Rome's vast pool of knowledge didn't vanish entirely. It merely went into a long, quiet slumber. Scrolls, filled with forgotten wisdom, gathered dust in the hushed confines of monasteries, their margins often adorned with whimsical drawings of dragons sketched by bored monks. The brilliant minds of Roman engineers transformed into distant legends, their feats seeming almost miraculous. People, no longer understanding the intricate how, simply began to assume that God, in his infinite wisdom, managed such things. Even in its profound ruin, Rome stubbornly refused to truly die. You could see its aqueducts still marching across the hills like skeletal stone giants, its roads carving through forests that had long forgotten who laid their paving stones, and its shattered ruins, whispering softly in the rain, a silent lament. You had one job, and so, after centuries had drifted by, humanity slowly began to relearn what the Romans had known all along: how to draw a straight line, how to guide water, and how to survive a harsh winter without waiting for divine intervention. Renaissance scholars, with a gentle sigh, would carefully dust off those ancient manuscripts, only to realize, with a quiet, almost melancholic despair, that the ancients had done it all first, and often so much better. Rome's ultimate decline wasn't born of ignorance, you see, but from a profound sense of complacency. It had crafted a world of such breathtaking perfection that subsequent generations simply assumed such flawless order was an immutable, permanent state. But, as history gently reminds us, nothing lasts forever. Still, that magnificent legacy endures, a silent whisper through the ages. Every elegant arch, every soaring dome, every sturdy bridge that dares to stand for more than a mere decade owes a quiet debt to that empire of master builders. Rome may have fallen, yes, but its foundational ideas, its sheer ingenuity, refuse to crumble. True genius, like a deep river, simply takes a very long, meandering detour. Now, let your mind drift eastward to the throbbing, vibrant heart of Constantinople, a city that never truly slept, always scheming, always judging. It was here, amidst this bustling tapestry of ambition and intrigue, that a young girl named Theodora first understood the stark meaning of survival. Born around the year 500 CE, her cradle wasn't one of silk, but of sawdust and the distant roars from the hippodrome, where her father served as a bear trainer, an entertainer of the masses with half-tamed beasts. When his life ended, the family's fragile sense of security dissolved like mist. Her mother, left with 3 daughters and no visible means of support, did what many desperate Byzantine women were forced to do. She turned to the stage. But understand, the theater of Constantinople was not a genteel hall of refined applause and quiet intellectual discourse. Oh no, it was the pulsing, vibrant underbelly of the empire itself, a dizzying blend of earthy comedy, alluring dance, sharp satire, and overt seduction. The performers were simultaneously adored and utterly despised. Men would flock to watch, to laugh, and to whisper endless gossip, all while pretending not to be utterly captivated by the powerful women who commanded the stage. Theodora stepped into this swirling world as a mere child, small but armed with a sharp tongue, already sensing that beauty alone would never be enough. She danced with captivating grace, mimed with poignant skill, and acted in plays that deftly mocked the powerful, while never failing to excite the crowds. Before she even reached her teenage years, some whispered of her as a courtesan, while others hailed her as a performing prodigy. But one thing everyone, friend and foe alike, agreed upon was her undeniable presence. When Theodora walked into a room, you could feel the very air shift, a subtle ripple of attention. Even her rivals couldn't deny it. Her routines were, by the standards of her time, truly scandalous. They were filled with bold, expressive gestures and a biting humor that aimed directly at the elite. She would mock politicians and priests with the very same knowing smirk she shared with her lovers. Yet, beneath the shimmering glitter and the boisterous laughter, she possessed a keen, unwavering eye for the harsh chasm between those who held power and those who had none. Theodora might have been compelled to entertain the upper echelons, but she never, for a moment, forgot that she was not truly one of them. By her late teens, her name echoed across the empire, infamous and unforgettable. She was praised for her captivating beauty, yet condemned for her audacious spirit. Aristocrats would scorn her openly in public, only to seek her out discreetly in private. She existed in a world where women were often regarded as mere ornaments, yet, somehow, she masterfully transformed that public mockery into a powerful, magnetic force. The girl from the stage was no longer simply performing. She was, in essence, rehearsing for a much grander role, preparing for power itself. And very soon, every corner of Constantinople would know her name and her story. But fame, as you might already know, can be a capricious companion. In Theodora's Constantinople, it could turn its back on you almost overnight. After a tumultuous string of messy affairs and rumors so extensive, they could have filled an entire scroll of parchment with gossip, Theodora found herself slowly losing her hold on public favor. A powerful figure she had perhaps too cleverly satirized, likely an influential official or a wealthy patron, ensured that the doors of the theater, her very livelihood, were closed to her. So, with few options and even less money, Theodora quietly left the glittering capital behind, setting her sights on the provinces. Her period of exile began in Alexandria, that vibrant crucible of intellect in the Eastern world. It was a city of vivid contrasts. You might find monks deeply engrossed in theological debate in one quiet corner, while lively dancers performed nearby, and passionate street preachers shouted sermons above the ceaseless hum of traders. Here, stripped of her stage, her costumes, and her fleeting fame, Theodora was left to confront herself. The woman once adored for her striking beauty now found herself utterly alone, surviving on her sharp wit and whatever meager scraps she could gather. Yet, what might have crushed another spirit only served to hone her mind, sharpening it to a fine edge. In Alexandria, she encountered a Christian sect known for its austere and rigorous teachings, quite possibly the Monotheites, who held the belief that Christ possessed a singular, divine nature. Their profound message of steadfast endurance and quiet humility resonated deeply within her. Theodora, the scandalous performer, began to ponder the concept of redemption. Not the gentle, whispered kind of redemption found in prayer, but a fierce, self-forged rebirth. She started to weave spirituality into her burgeoning ambition, understanding that both could serve her journey of survival. And perhaps even more profoundly, she learned something invaluable: that influence isn't merely earned on a fleeting stage. It is commanded through unwavering conviction, a quiet inner strength that emanates from deep within. Imagine now the soft light of distant stages and the quiet reverence in ancient churches, as you observe how people in those times truly listened to those who spoke with unwavering conviction. Theodora, ever the natural performer, understood this deeply, knowing precisely how to weave that sense of certainty into an art all her own. Her journey then took her far from the bustling city of Alexandria, across the hushed, expansive deserts of North Africa and Syria. For a while, she traveled alongside a wealthy official, sharing conversations under starry desert skies, before their paths gently diverged. This was not the shameful wandering whispers claimed it to be back in Constantinople's echoing gossip halls. No, this was a profound passage of self-discovery, a quiet chrysalis from which a future empress would gracefully emerge. When Theodora finally returned to the beating heart of the empire, you see, she was no longer the spirited dancer who sought coins and cheers. She was something far more formidable. A woman who had gazed upon the world's vastness, absorbed its intricate hypocrisies, and quietly decided she would never again be at its whim. She carried no glittering gold, no inherited title, no powerful family name to shield her, only a serene yet intense inner fire that seemed to unsettle anyone who lingered too long in its gaze. Constantinople itself seemed largely unchanged, its gilded mosaics still shimmering, the ancient whispers of sin and sanctity still drifting through its cool marble streets. But she had transformed. The once vivacious performer was now a woman of composure, deep reflection, and sharp intellect. She had learned a crucial truth. True power didn't reside in the fleeting applause of the many, but in the concentrated attention of the very few who governed them. And soon, one man in particular would offer her that precise, focused attention. His name was Justinian. At this moment, he wasn't yet the emperor, but rather the exceptionally bright nephew of the aging Emperor Justin I. He was ambitious, disciplined, and possessed a touch of that charming social awkwardness you sometimes find in powerful men before history polishes their edges. He was utterly devoted to order, to the meticulous frameworks of law, and to a grand vision of destiny. Yet he held a fascinating vulnerability. He prized a keen mind just as much as a beautiful face. And Theodora, you understand, seemed to embody both with an effortless grace. Legend softly recounts that Justinian first encountered her in a modest dwelling where she sat quietly, spinning wool, her hands moving with practiced rhythm while offering wise counsel to other women. The spectacle of the hippodrome was long behind her. Here she was a quiet enigma, cloaked in humility. But when she spoke, her words, though gentle, possessed the precise edge of a finely honed blade. Justinian found himself utterly captivated, not primarily by her undeniable beauty, but by the profound depth of her intellect. She understood the intricate dance of people and politics, and that subtle art of guiding men to believe they had conceived an idea themselves. Their connection was immediate, a powerful current, yet profoundly scandalous to the rigid Byzantine high society. You can almost hear their disapproving whispers, the rustle of their silk robes. To marry an ex-actress was simply unthinkable. Actresses were, by law, forbidden from such unions. But Justinian was not a man to be deterred by existing statutes. He, quite literally, rewrote them. A special, unprecedented decree was issued, lifting the restriction, clearing the path for him to marry Theodora. It was an act of quiet defiance that sent ripples through the city, shaking the moralists of Constantinople to their perfumed core. When they eventually wed, around 525 CE, the empire's tongues wagged with fervent speculation. "The emperor's nephew has married a courtesan," they murmured behind cupped hands. But the faint, scornful laughter of the courtiers soon faded. For the first time in history, a woman once met with jeers from the stage, now walked the cool, marble halls of power, not as a clandestine mistress, but as a recognized, legitimate partner. And the empire, you see, had no idea what truly lay ahead. 2 years later, in 527 CE, a soft tremor passed through the empire as the aging and frail Emperor Justin officially crowned his brilliant nephew, Justinian, as co-emperor. And there, standing beside him, dressed not in the silks of a performer, but in the majestic imperial purple, was Theodora. For every senator who clenched his jaw, muttering silent prayers of disgust, there were tens of thousands of citizens in the streets, gazing up, whispering, wondering how a woman born to a bearkeeper could ascend to the highest throne in the East. Her coronation was more than a mere political ceremony. It was a resonant public declaration that the empire's ancient rules were being gracefully, yet firmly rewritten. Theodora was not there by chance, nor solely by affection. She had earned her place, piece by quiet piece. In every conversation, she met Justinian's intellect stride for stride. In every council, she deftly outmaneuvered nobles who had foolishly underestimated her. When foreign envoys bowed, unsure whether to address her as Augusta or Your Majesty, Theodora ensured they soon learned to use both. She quickly transcended the role of a mere ceremonial consort, while Justinian immersed himself in the meticulous crafting of law codes, the grand designs of aqueducts, and the intricacies of tax reforms. Theodora devoted herself to understanding people, the true, breathing machinery of the empire. She read letters from distant provincial governors, engaged in thoughtful discussions with church leaders, and even listened with quiet empathy to petitions from women who had no other voice in court. To many, she became a luminous symbol of possibility. To others, she was a dangerous, unsettling precedenta, former entertainer wielding imperial authority, unsettling the men who had built their entire careers on pedigree, not proven ability. Her influence, you will observe, soon became utterly undeniable. She quietly advised Justinian on every matter, from delicate diplomacy to essential domestic reforms, especially those touching upon the lives of women. Under her thoughtful guidance, laws were passed, gently protecting women from forced prostitution and granting them greater property rights. Theodora, once whispered about as the empire's shame, had become its unexpected, yet profound, moral reformer. But such power, as you might imagine, came at a cost. The aristocrats held a deep, quiet loathing for her. Monks murmured in hushed tones that she was Jezebel reborn. Chroniclers, like the famously scathing Procopius, penned scandalous secret histories, claiming she still harbored the soul of a seductress. Yet, the very woman they mocked behind closed doors was the same one standing tall beside the most powerful man in the world, calm, composed, and utterly untouchable. By the time Justinian officially ascended as sole emperor later that year, Theodora was far more than simply his empress. She was his equal, the sharp, guiding mind behind the golden throne. The streets that once echoed with her laughter as a performer now echoed with the indelible whisper of her legend. The next great turning point began, as revolutions often do, with entertainment gone profoundly awry. In January of 532 CE, the Hippodrome, that very arena where Theodora's father once tended bears, and where she herself had once danced, erupted in a fury far beyond mere sport. The rival chariot teams, the blues and the greens, had long been more than just groups of fervent sports fans. They were deeply rooted political factions, each commanding fierce loyalties. On that fateful day, their boisterous cheers transformed into chilling war cries. What began as a protest against certain arrests escalated swiftly into 6 days of widespread bloodshed, consuming fire, and open rebellion. This was the infamous Nika Revolt. Byzantium itself seemed to burn. Senators, quietly eager to reclaim some of their lost influence, secretly sided with the rioters. The mob, numbering in the tens of thousands, swelled through the city streets. Imagine, if you will, the palace walls trembling. Outside, the city pulsed with a furious roar, a deep, angry sound, demanding change, demanding a new emperor. Inside, within the hushed imperial chambers, the tension was palpable. You can almost feel the tremor in the air as advisors, their voices tight with fear, urged Justinian to simply leave, to abandon the capital, the crown, and his own dignity for the sake of safety. But then, a different presence emerged. She stood there, regal in the deep, rich purple of royalty, a color that spoke of both power and the blood of sacrifice. This was Theodora. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, even as panic rippled around her. She rose before the council, her voice a calm, clear counterpoint to the surrounding chaos. To flee, she began, her words settling softly into the charged air, would be to disdain the very safety you seek. A crown, once worn, should never be survived in its absence. Indeed, this imperial purple, she mused, a quiet strength in her tone, makes for a most fitting shroud. It was more than just bravery, it was a masterful stroke of strategy. Her conviction, like a steady hand in the dark, pulled Justinian back from the brink of despair. The emperor, who had been moments from flight, felt his resolve solidify. You can almost see the spark of determination returning to his eyes as he issued new orders to his loyal generals, Belisarius and Mundus, storm the Hippodrome. The afternoon that followed was a profound, terrible silence. 30,000 rebels, silenced in a single, brutal afternoon. The rebellion, born of a roaring mob, ended not with a spoken word, but with the chilling echo of steel and the lingering scent of smoke. Theodora's unwavering defiance had, in that moment, saved an empire. Her speech, quiet yet profound, would become a legend, taught for centuries to come. Yet, beyond the words themselves, it revealed the very essence of her power. She wasn't just a comfort to Justinian, she was the very backbone of his rule, the unyielding core. After that terrible revolt, no one dared to openly question her authority again. The courtiers, who once might have whispered slyly behind their silk fans, now bowed deeply, their respect, or perhaps their fear, made manifest. The very mob that had once called for her downfall had, in their graves, found a chilling silence. Theodora had shown, in the most stark and brutal way, that she was not merely a survivor of hardship, but a meticulous architect of survival itself. As the last tendrils of smoke from the Nika revolt finally dissipated, Theodora emerged from the ashes, not just as empress, but as something far rarer, a ruler forged in the intense heat of crisis. Constantinople, though wounded, its streets bearing the scars of fire, its people shaken, and its faith in leadership fragile, held a new opportunity for her. While Justinian set about rebuilding the city in the gleaming strength of marble and stone, Theodora quietly began to rebuild its very soul. You see, she had never forgotten what it felt like to be at the mercy of others, to live as a performer, as a woman often dismissed before she even had a chance to speak. Now, with power firmly in her grasp, she wielded it with an unwavering purpose, a quiet ruthlessness, always in service of those who had none. She championed reforms that no emperor before had even dared to consider. Imagine a world where women, forced into prostitution, were granted sanctuary and genuine protection, where the desperate were no longer easily sold into slavery, where husbands who abandoned their wives could face justice, and where women could finally inherit property in their own right. To the elite of Constantinople, these were truly shocking proposals. Soft, they would sneer over their spiced wine, unfit for the grandeur of empire. But Theodora paid them no mind. Her focus was on the women who would arrive at the palace gates each dawn, their hopes thin but persistent, seeking a justice they could find nowhere else. She even established a house, which she named the Metanoia, meaning repentance, a quiet haven for former prostitutes, where they could live, work, and truly begin anew. It wasn't merely charity. It was a quiet, profound vengeance, carefully veiled in mercy, transforming the empire's forgotten shame into a source of enduring strength. Yet, her moral authority, like a beautifully crafted blade, was sharp on both edges. Many of her critics, unable to reconcile her past with her present, dismissed her reforms as pure hypocrisy, constantly bringing up her youth, her earlier life. But they utterly missed the point. Theodora's true power sprang precisely from the fact that she had navigated the very life the empire condemned, and not only survived it, but mastered it. Her empathy wasn't a theory from dusty scrolls. It was a lived, breathing experience, now wrapped in the finest silks. Even Justinian, the great codifier of law, the architect of immense legal systems, often deferred to her unique insight on social matters. When he meticulously revised the empire's vast legal code, her influence could be clearly seen, like a watermark, in the new protections afforded to women and the poor. Her gentle fingerprints were embedded within the very laws that would shape Byzantine society for centuries to come. But for all her profound compassion, she was, by no means, a saint. Theodora's mercy had its very distinct boundaries, and her enemies, you can imagine, learned this lesson in the hardest possible ways. For every woman she gently lifted from the shadows, there was a nobleman brought low, often without even realizing, until it was far too late, that the empress had already, quietly, sealed his fate. Power in Byzantium was a grand, elaborate performance, and no one understood the intricate stage, the hidden currents, better than Theodora. With every deep bow from a general, every polite smile from a senator, you can almost sense the presence of a hidden dagger, a quiet threat beneath the glittering facade. The court of Constantinople was a labyrinthine nest of ambition, and Theodora, undeniably, was the brightest, most envied serpent within it. Her meteoric rise had deeply humiliated the old aristocracy. Imagine the noblewomen, their bloodlines meticulously traced back to the very foundations of Rome, barely able to stomach a former actress commanding the respect of their husbands, their brothers. Some, for appearances, feigned loyalty, their smiles thin. Others whispered poison in the corridors, heavy with the scent of incense, their words like slow-acting venom. Monks, their voices thundering from pulpits, proclaimed the empress to be nothing less than the devil himself, clad in silk. Chroniclers like Procopius, her most venomous critic, meticulously recorded her as a scheming seductress, a woman who used her body with the same ruthless precision that others used a sword. In truth, she was merely guilty of doing precisely what every man in that opulent palace did, but with far greater skill and a deeper understanding of the game. Her keen intelligence and sharp wit made her both admired and, crucially, deeply feared. She was known to reduce courtiers to utter silence with a single cool glance, to freeze a senator mid-sentence with just one subtly raised eyebrow. When Justinian, at times, faltered in his judgment, it was Theodora who quietly made the hard decisions, especially those that demanded a complete absence of mercy. She played politics like a game of chess, a master strategist, and her opponents rarely realized they had been irrevocably cornered until the board was quietly, efficiently swept clean. Her complex rivalry with Antonina, the formidable wife of General Belisarius, was a strange dance of both alliance and intermittent war. These two women, you can imagine, subtly ruled their powerful husbands, often as power partners, only to then turn on each other in sudden bursts of betrayal and equally sudden, calculated reconciliation, a constant shifting drama that exhausted even the most seasoned gossips. One day, they might share the deepest secrets over a glass of wine. The next, one would be subtly orchestrating the other's downfall. It was court life at its most raw and pure, a delicate friendship laced ever so subtly with arsenic. Yet, Theodora's sharpest, most enduring weapon was not fear, but loyalty. Those who served her faithfully were rewarded beyond measure. You can picture her raising servants to the esteemed ranks of courtiers, elevating courtiers to the powerful positions of governors, even subtly elevating certain women to the status of saints in the eyes of the empire itself. She meticulously built her own intricate network of spies, informants, and loyal clerks, a silent, unseen army that answered to no one but her. Behind her jeweled veil, her mind was always calculating, always observing, always watching. Theodora had learned the very first fundamental rule of power early in her life, that survival depends not on a naive innocence, but on absolute, unwavering control. And though her enemies, as you settle in, imagine the opulent halls of Byzantium, where Theodora, adorned in gold and silk, understood a truth deeper than any imperial decree. She knew that a crown isn't simply passed down. It's a battleground, defended with each deliberate, often uncompromising choice. If you picture politics as her arena, then religion was certainly her intricate chessboard. The Byzantine Empire, you see, was far more than just a kingdom. It was a sacred order, cloaked in the grandeur of imperial robes and ancient traditions. Yet, beneath the glittering gold leaf mosaics and the comforting swirl of incense, this vast empire was deeply fractured by intense theological debates. The question that tore at the heart of the Christian world seemed deceptively simple. Did Christ possess one nature or two? For those outside the empire's borders, it felt like a minor theological detail, a mere splitting of hairs. But for Byzantium, this wasn't a philosophical query. It was a cause for civil war, a divide that ran deep through the very fabric of society. Justinian, always the steadfast lawmaker, upheld the orthodox belief that Christ embodied both human and divine natures. Theodora, however, quietly nurtured and supported the Monophysites, who held the conviction that his nature was singular and entirely divine. For her, this was more than just a matter of faith. It was a profound act of loyalty. It was the Monophysites who had offered her refuge during her time of exile in distant Alexandria. Now, in the heart of the empire, she returned that sanctuary. While Justinian engaged in grand debates with bishops, Theodora pursued her own, more subtle game. You can almost imagine her moving through the palace, transforming certain hidden corners into havens for persecuted clergy, ensuring their safety. She masterminded the quiet return of exiled monks, smuggling them back into the city under cover of darkness, and even hosted secret religious councils, all while her emperor husband was just a few rooms away. In public, during the elaborate Orthodox ceremonies, you'd see her serene smile, a gentle nod of agreement. But in private, she dispatched carefully penned letters, shimmering with gold, to Monophysite leaders hidden away in remote deserts and quiet monasteries. Some might have called it hypocrisy, others astute diplomacy. For Theodora, it was simply justice, a balancing act of conviction. Her subtle maneuvering wasn't just about religious belief, it was deeply strategic. By championing this marginalized sect, she cleverly balanced her husband's immense authority with her own growing independent network of allies. While Justinian meticulously crafted the empire's laws, Theodora, in her own quiet way, tended to its very soul. She understood a fundamental truth that her husband never quite grasped. Faith had the power to guide the masses far more effectively than any written decree. But these actions, while strengthening her position, also subtly deepened the divide between the imperial couple. Justinian adored her, without a doubt, but their deeply held faiths began to stand as quiet rivals. He believed that unity would be found in strict doctrine. She believed it lay in compassion and mercy. And so, even as they ruled side by side, it was often as if they presided over two distinct empires within one, his, built on the solid, unyielding marble of law, and hers, on the vibrant, adaptable tapestry of conviction. Her quiet defiance left an indelible mark, one that echoes even now. While the Orthodox chroniclers of her time often spoke her name with condemnation, the Monophysites held her memory sacred, revering her as their secret empress. Centuries later, in the hushed solitude of remote monasteries, you can almost hear their whispers, telling her story, calling her the protector of the true faith. In an age where a person's belief could be a death sentence, Theodora had dared to do the unthinkable. She transformed what was labeled as heresy into a source of power, and deep compassion into the very heart of an empire. By the mid-540s, Constantinople itself had undergone a magnificent transformation. Much like Theodora, the sweeping reconstruction following the Nika revolt had turned the city into a sparkling jewel of the world, crowned by the majestic Hagia Sophia, its vast dome seeming to float like a heavenly canopy above the intricate skyline. Yet, behind all this splendor, a quiet dread began to creep through the empire, the weariness of plague and exhaustion. Justinian's ambitious wars had drained the imperial coffers, leaving them thin. Disease, silent and relentless, swept through the bustling capital, and even the once vibrant empress herself began to subtly fade like a distant memory. Theodora had embodied so many roles in her extraordinary life: a dancer, an exile, a powerful queen, a bold reformer. But one thing she had never been was fragile. Still, by 548 CE, a quiet illness began to tighten its grip, slowly, relentlessly. Historians softly suggest it might have been cancer, though the complete truth is buried with her, lost to the passage of time. Even as her body weakened, you can sense her will remaining as unyielding as iron. She continued to hold court from her bed, her voice perhaps a little softer, but her commands still clear, delivered through loyal attendants. She would gently scold ministers, her gaze firm, utterly refusing any hint of pity. She had lived too long amidst weakness to ever display it herself. Her final months were marked by a strangely serene calm. The woman who once confronted angry riots and challenged theologians alike spent her last days enveloped by the empire she had so profoundly reshaped. Justinian, consumed by a profound grief, visited her every single day. For him, she was so much more than an empress. She had been his trusted shield, his wisest counselor, his truest equal. Without her, even the monumental laws he had so painstakingly written seemed to lose their very life, their purpose dimmed. He had once rebuilt Constantinople from ashes, raising it to new glory. But Theodora, he knew, he could not rebuild. When she finally drew her last breath, at the age of around 48, the grand city seemed to fall into a deep, pervasive silence. The very streets that had once echoed with mocking whispers now seemed to weep. The woman who had once danced barefoot in taverns was gently laid to rest in imperial robes of rich purple and gold, a final testament to her journey. Justinian ensured she was buried in the sacred church of the Holy Apostles, the revered resting place of emperors themselves, an honor that very few women throughout history had ever truly earned. But Theodora's passing was not an ending. It was a transformation. Her legacy gently endured, an invisible thread woven into every law that protected the vulnerable and the poor, in every woman who found the courage to speak her mind, and in every glistening stone of the Hagia Sophia that still catches the sunlight. She had risen from the shadowed depths of the theater to the radiant glory of the throne, wielding her beauty, her keen intellect, and her audacious spirit like divine tools. Centuries later, historians still ponder, debating softly whether she was a saint or a sinner. The truth, as it so often is, gently resides somewhere in between, nestled deep within the story of a woman who simply refused to be forgotten. Now, let your mind drift to another time, another distant land, before they became the formidable, iron-fisted rulers of the Baltic, known as the Teutonic Knights. They were simply a small group of German pilgrims, their presence marked only by a humble tent. The year was 1190, and the siege of Acre was slowly grinding the Third Crusade into the dust, the air thick with the distant sounds of battle fading and the inescapable scent of blood and disease. The Holy Land, in those days, had become a crucible of fervent faith and stark death. Amidst the swirling chaos, a handful of men from Bremen and Lübeck, German merchants who had become crusaders, set up a makeshift hospital. It was a simple structure beneath white sails, sails they had painstakingly stitched from their very own ships. Their initial aim was not conquest, but pure compassion, to care for their wounded countrymen who had fallen beneath the relentless, burning sun. That quiet, humble act, you see, would become the tiny spark that ignited a much larger and eventually a much darker fire. What began as a small band of compassionate healers soon transformed into something far more formidable. War, in its relentless way, has a habit of turning charity into an urgent necessity, and that necessity, in turn, into immense power. Within just a decade, these German brothers, once dedicated solely to tending the sick, found themselves taking up arms, not for aggression, but to defend their precious hospital. Their initial compassion slowly hardened into unwavering discipline. Their faith, once gentle, sharpened into an intense zeal. By 1198, the transformation was complete, sealed by a quiet papal decree. With the blessing of Pope Innocent III, the Order of Brothers of the German Hospital of St. Mary in Jerusalem was officially declared a military order, a profound fusion of the monk and the soldier. They adopted distinct white mantles, marked with a stark black cross, a striking symbol of purity, wrapped in a quiet, undeniable menace. Their vows were sacred, solemn promises of poverty, chastity, yet their overarching goal had unmistakably shifted towards the military. You can almost see them, these figures, drawing inspiration from the renowned Templars and Hospitallers, yet distinguishing themselves with a singular, profound difference. They were German. Their very language, the meticulous structure of their organization, the unwavering rigidity of their ranks, all of it seemed to mirror the cool, precise order of the Holy Roman Empire itself. Imagine them as crusaders with an almost administrative heart, warriors who could kneel in prayer, clash in battle, and then, with the same methodical discipline, meticulously compile their reports. For a time, their early years unfolded in the sun-drenched Holy Land, diligently guarding Christian travelers and fortresses. But, as the desert winds whispered of change, Jerusalem, the very heart of their mission, felt as though it were slowly slipping from grasp. The grand, crusading dream was fading, dissolving like mist in the heat, and the Teutonic Knights sensed this shifting tide. To endure, they understood they would require not just a new territory, but a fresh, sacred land to claim. And so, their gaze would soon lift from the ancient sands of Palestine, turning instead towards the chill, ancient forests of the Baltic, a landscape of untold trees and falling snow. It was there, amidst the old gods and the quiet, pristine white, that their true dominion would quietly begin to unfurl. You begin to understand that discipline was the very essence, the deep, fundamental core of the Teutonic Order. To become one of them, you didn't simply cast aside your worldly goods. You relinquished your very self. Imagine stepping forward, surrendering your given name, letting go of the ties to your family, dissolving any flicker of personal ambition you might have held. In return, a stark white cloak would be draped over your shoulders, adorned with the bold black cross, a chilling, unmistakable emblem of God's soldiers emerging from the north. Their unspoken creed, perhaps, was a simple, stark command. Fight, serve, obey, Life within those walls was one of severe monasticism, rigid in its every detail. Each knight would solemnly pledge vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, grand ideals that often resonated with more purity on aged parchment than in the gritty reality of their daily lives. Poverty, for the individual, meant an absence of personal possessions or wealth, even as the order itself quietly amassed vast riches from conquered lands and the spoils of battle. Chastity required abstaining from women, yet the endless frontier stretched long before them. The biting winters felt even longer, and the subtle currents of temptation could be felt, a quiet hum in the air of every small foreign village. But obedience, that was a different matter. It was absolute, unyielding. If a knight dared to question a commander, there was no gentle discussion, no debate to be had. Instead, he would face the stark choice of immediate expulsion or the swift, cold edge of a blade. Their society was sharply structured. At its pinnacle stood the Grand Master, a figure embodying the sternness of a general, the piety of a priest, and the meticulousness of a bureaucrat, all woven into one. Beneath him were the commanders, the priests, and the humble lay brothers, who tirelessly managed the logistics, tilled the fields, and oversaw trade. Even for those born of noble lineage, humility was a constant, enforced practice.